without further ado, I'll pass over to Alison.
Thanks, Julia. So it's great that you're able to join this webinar, and it's really a privilege for us to be able to sort of tell you a little bit about Altrui and a bit about Fertility, and to introduce the two people who are going to be joining us. One is Becky, and I think, Julia, you'll explain a bit more about her part in this, and one of our amazing donors called Leanne, so she'll be in a bit later. But first of all, this is a webinar held for Altrui and Fertility, which is our sister company. Now, many of you may not have heard about them or our link with them, but they are very much part of us and we're part of them. We find egg donors for people like yourselves, and Fertility are the ones who then take the donors through the process, looking after and supporting them through the whole egg donation treatment cycle. But in addition, they'll also be looking after you as a recipient, because this journey can be extremely lonely. It can be very, very difficult. And it's really important that you have someone who can bat for your side, really, and look after you going through the whole process. So,
listen, could I just butt in? Could I quickly say, could you say your relationship to Altrui? In case.
Yeah, sorry, I assume everybody knows who I am, and of course that's really crazy. I'm the founder of Altrui, and I'm Alison, and I started Altrui with my husband 10 years ago. Actually, it's nearly 11 now, and during that time we have found hundreds of couples and egg donor in the UK, which leads me really into how, what we do here, and that is to and how we started, really, because at the time I was working with a big fertility units in London. I was seeing a lot of people who, I have a lot of experience in fertility, and was seeing people who were struggling to have a baby. And at the time, the only option for people needing an egg donor was to go overseas, either to Spain or to America. And actually, at the time, I felt it was really important that we could try and find people in the UK. There are so many reasons why I passionately believe the UK is the right route. There's a provenance of the donors, the protection for you as a recipient, there's the information to access later on from the HFEA about your donor and a child. And I really felt very strongly that we should find people here in the UK. But in order to do that, we had to ask them, and we had to find people who would be prepared to help. So we find altruistic donors with the amazing help of our sister company, Fertility, and they are the ones, and Julia is one of the key players in this, to go out and literally we advertise, we do everything we possibly can to find people like Leanne to come forward and to offer their help. So at the moment, there'll be a lot of you feeling very, I think, probably a bit lost, a bit worried, how COVID is affecting everything. And I guess I need to reassure you at the first point that for us, it's not just business as usual, but we are seriously ramping up. It's an incredibly big time for us to reach people. There are people at home, there are donors who just want to help at the moment because of the negativity, the depression that's out there, but to feel that they're doing something, even if they can't help perhaps the NHS or something a bit bigger, they can help people like you. And it's a really good time for us to be looking for these donors, and it's a really good time for you to be coming into this program. But it isn't straightforward with egg donation. We totally understand that you need a bit of time. There'll be some of you who will be well ready for this, and I urge you, those are the sort of people to take advantage of this sort of lockdown, really. But there'll be others who will find that this is actually quite a transition to make. It's just difficult, and it might be that you've come to this place from a lot of treatment or a diagnosis which you just did not expect to happen. So for us, it's about trying to get someone to help you as quickly as we possibly can. And as I said, now's the time to do that. So I think really what we have found with the donors who have come in at the moment is that they are all very, very engaged with helping. As I've said, we find altruistic donors. They're young women between 18 and 35, and they genuinely want to help. They may have seen somebody struggling to start a family. They may have got children and really appreciate what it's like to have a family themselves. They might be on the other donor registers, bone marrow, blood. I mean, we have some donors who donate breast milk and hair. And it's those sort of people who come forward and offer their help. So for us at Altrui, our task is to talk to every single person who comes to us, and we are working with hundreds. I mean, this week alone, and Fertility have done an amazing job. We've got a lot of people we're talking to. Sarah and Kate, who both work for Altrui, are onto it. And these are people who we have to talk to make sure that they fully understand exactly what's involved in the process. It's incredibly personal, this. It's not like donating to an egg bank. I think you'll hear from Leanne that the way she's found it different. It is about getting someone to help you, and someone who we think you would really like if you knew them, and someone who we feel would love to help you if they knew you. Because at the end of the day, as you're probably all aware, there is the identifying information that is accessible to a donor-conceived person when they're 18 in the UK. So for us, it's a real passion to get this right at the beginning. And so one of the things that we thought of when we started Altrui was we had to get this right. We had to find one donor for a recipient or recipient couple. That gave you the best chance. It enables you to potentially freeze blastocysts. So if the first cycle doesn't work, you've got a fallback position without having to go and find another donor. It's also an opportunity for some people to have a family, and it's incredibly exciting to be able to facilitate that, really. It's what we always wanted for people. So it actually does work out to be very cost effective. The other thing we felt was absolute key cornerstone was that the matching is fundamental. And how we do that is when you come to us and you register your details, we get photographs of you, we get a little bit of information about sort of people you are, and then I spend a good 3/4 of an hour on the telephone with each and every one of you to find out who you are as people, really get a sense of you as a person. That helps with everything else we've got from you to find you someone who, like I said, we think you would like the help from. Everybody is different. Each one of you is unique. So what might work for one person in a donor, like green eyes or a black heritage background, won't work for everybody. You know, each one of you is different, and it's really that's something that's quite important, as I find out in that call, the sort of person you are and what you're looking for in a donor, what would help you make that emotional and mental transition from going through the genetically linked route to actually accepting the help of a third person. We find out a lot more about the donor in the course of our time. We're constantly talking to donors. As I said, we get a huge amount of information. This is where all the work goes into it for us. It's doing our due diligence, because not everybody can donate. We have hundreds of people, but we lose 90% of them because either they're not suitable, or once they really understand this commitment, they feel that it's not for them. So our challenge and our task is we're a bit like a funneling system, if you can imagine that. So we get a lot of people coming in at the top, they work through us, and at the end of the day, we have a spill of really fantastic women who can help you. And it's that we're focused on, and that's our task, is to get the right person for you, because as I said, it helps you with the transition. I think had I ever wanted this help myself, I would want to feel that the person who was helping me was right, and that I actually felt I could relate to them at some point, at some level. So matching is really key. And of course, because we do one-to-one donation, we carefully match you. You get a lot of information about that donor, including her physical characteristics, and you'll get to know her age, whether she's got children, what she does, why she's donating. But we also ask them to complete a profile about themselves. And that gives you a far broader idea of that person. We also ask if we can get them photographs of that donor as a child up to the age of 6. So you're equipped with a lot of information. And when we have identified someone for you, we pass over this non-identifying information. We find out what you'd like to do. And if you'd like to continue, then we do a referral. And I refer you into the centre which would suit the donor best. Now, our huge advantage here at Altrui, and it's the same with our Fertility, is that we are a virtual clinic, which in this time is just amazing. It's really ahead of the game, ahead of everything, because we can reach people, and we can, when we've got the right donor, we can send her through potentially to a Fertility who can screen this donor up ready, even with this lockdown, because a lot of it's done virtually, and they can work with this donor and get her ready for to start a treatment cycle once we get through this difficult time. So that's how they fit in. So really, we find the donors, a Fertility work with them to get them through a treatment cycle. And, you know, our task, as I've said, is to find you the right sort of person. So that's really how Altrui works. It's in a nutshell, but I'm guessing that there will be lots of questions. We're here to answer them. We are very much open. We are very busy, but we are working to get the help that you will need as soon as we possibly can.
Well, it's funny you should say, Alison, because I've collected quite a lot of questions that have come in, and it might be great to start with you know, what are the opening hours at the moment? Are you running? Are you open as usual? And what's the case with Fertility as well? So
Yep.
if you could give a little bit of information on that.
For us, we are open. We start at 9:30 with calls, and we work through until 5. We have separate. We have definite book slots because we are working with a lot of donors as well. So but we are here the whole time, and we answer emails the whole time. Fertility are fantastic. They've got a 24/7 service, so you always get an advisor when you contact them. They're similar. They're the ones who will support you going through the treatment anyway, but they are there to answer your questions, and they are open, as I understand it, 24/7 as well.
So I think normally it's 7 days a week. Right now it is reduced to 6 days a week, but it's I think 8 to 6 during weekdays and 9 to 1. So the way that we normally explain this is that Altrui do the matching side of it, and Fertility is there to answer questions about treatment, and they're the ones who handle treatment and the clinical screening. And I also will say we've had a lot of questions come in that are clinic focused, and we'll look to answer those through Fertility, since what Altrui really specialize in is the donor matching. I think it would be great to know, Alison, the response of the COVID situation with donors. And you know, do you find that there are fewer? What's going on?
The COVID situation for donors hasn't really changed anything. The ones who are in the process at the moment are all very engaged in continuing. We are able to reach donors in a way that we just couldn't before, because they were either working or out and about, or at a party or whatever. And so for us, it's actually an ideal time, because they're there really at home and probably looking for a phone call and contact from us. So the COVID situation hasn't changed it in terms of finding donors. What it has done, of course, is to lock down all the hospitals. So the treatment cycles themselves have been put on hold until, and just postponed for a couple of months. It's not a particularly long time. Well, we don't know that, of course, I can't say that. But everybody will be opening up the clinics as soon as it is possible to do that. But right now, what we can do is prepare the donors, and we can prepare you as a recipient ready to make the best use of when this lockdown is lifted.
And the donors already in who've been matched, you don't find that they're changing their mind or?
No, we've contacted individually every single donor, and they are incredible. I think that's testament to the personal side of this, because when we match you, they will know very little information about you, because of course it's totally non-identifying, it's anonymous at the point of donation. But I will tell the donors why I've matched them, and I will also say a little bit about, and it really is non-identifying, about why you need help. And for them, it just makes it so personal, so different. And I think that's where it's coming to its own at this time, because they are all very much engaged. They're not changing their minds. They're all saying, no, don't worry, we'll wait. We know they need help. That's absolutely fine. And that's a massive difference. It's a massive change to perhaps a donor who might otherwise be going through an egg bank or an egg sharing scheme, who might otherwise change their minds in this situation, this climate.
I've got a few technical questions.
Okay,
So, shoot. Once the eggs are fertilized into embryos, does the egg donor waive their legal right to withdraw the donation? And attached to that, presumably there may be enough to freeze. So the question is more in relation to the surplus embryos. If they are frozen for a period of time and then the donor withdraws, where does this leave the recipient legally and financially?
Okay, a simple question, really. The donors have absolute rights over her eggs, and she is legally the owner of any blastocyst with the male partner. The question of potentially changing their mind, in all honesty and straight up, in 30 years of being in fertility, I've only known it to happen once, and that is where it's been a known donation and it's between siblings and they've fallen out. The donors are so well prepared for this. This does not really feature, and I really can say hand on heart, this just hasn't happened. I think you probably got enough to worry about without that, to be honest. But I think if the very worst case happened, I mean, we would certainly pick you up. I think you'd need picking up from that one. We just would not see that coming, and I think the clinic would also do that, because there is a sort of duty of care, really. But as I say, it hasn't happened in all the time I've been working in 30 odd years in fertility, but there is always going to be a first time. And as I say, it's more likely to happen where it's gone into an egg sharing, which actually is a really good point. If this is not egg sharing, so you're going to get the total amount of eggs donated in that cycle. But with egg sharing, where perhaps that recipient, that donor, sorry, she's a donor, has not got pregnant, she might then think, oh, well, actually, maybe I want those embryos, particularly if she knows there's donor sperm. So you know, this is really the safest way to do it, and there are no emotional connections other than that which we create between you and the donor. So the donor just doesn't get into this, well, I've changed my mind because I don't like you anymore, sort of thing. So
Wonderful.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. In a moment, we are going to move over to Becky, just to make sure that everyone has time to share their experience. Just another question. What tests can the donor expect to have prior to donation?
Okay. The test, there are two sections of tests. The first test really is to get through Altrui and to get through our basic assessment and screening. And if a donor is over 25, we do an AMH, which you might well have heard about. It's just to check their anti-Müllerian hormone. When she goes to, we then refer them to clinic, and when they go into clinic, they have a massive full clinical screening, which involves swabs, scans, bloods. Bloods are done for virology, they're done for hematology, they go for karyotyping, which is genetic testing, they go for cystic fibrosis screening. It is really, really, it's quite a thing. It takes about 3 hours for the donors to go through that, and they also have a counselling appointment to ensure that they, you know, they're really keen to do this, and we're not sort of persuading them or bribing them to do it. So their screening is really done in clinic, and it really is extensive, and the clinics all follow the World Health Organization guidelines and the British Fertility Society guidelines, and there is no way to shortcut that screening process.
Great. And maybe one or two more before we move over to the recipient. We will come back to questions. What are the success rates using donor eggs? And does it make a difference if I use a donor who is between 31 and 33, or one who's below 29, for example?
Okay. The pregnancy rates with us are phenomenal. We're running at about 78–80%. It just sort of goes up and down depending on what results we get in. So it's a really good way. It's one-to-one donation, and that is why. So the best blastocysts can be to be used for a cycle of treatment. We have found that it really doesn't make a difference. It really does not make a difference if you have a 31, 32, 33, 34, 35-year-old, if their whole clinical picture in terms of their fertility is good and it's right, because we can get a 23-year-old who may have children and she just doesn't do very well at all, but we might get someone who is, say, 31, 32, and we've got clear evidence of this, that they do incredibly well. But we wouldn't put forward anybody who didn't have a good AMH, and they then have an antral follicle count when they're in, they have an LH and FSH, which you'll probably all be familiar with. So there's a massive clinical fertility picture that comes from this, and really it doesn't make a difference. We do get clinicians who say to people like yourselves, oh, ask them for a donor who's had children and they're young. That's really, I have to say, and be honest about it, we've just not, that has not come out in our stats at all. We've had 35-year-olds who have done incredibly well, produced lovely eggs and blastocysts, and people have gone on and had children, and not just one or two, but maybe 3 children from that donor.
Great. And one last question, which I've gotten a few times, which is how long does it take approximately to find a match? Does Altrui have a database of donors, or is there a waiting list? Okay,
there is no waiting list. Each one of you is absolutely unique and individual, and as I've explained, my task, or our task at Altrui, and there's only 3 of us in this company, is to find the right donor for you. So it may be that you're listening to this and we have someone who's just great and who would really fit for you. That means that donor goes for you, because it is all about the match. You might be of a different heritage or ethnicity, in which case we may have a donor in or coming through our process, and we can match you really quickly. Or we may not have a donor at all at the moment. We've just got to go and find her. And it does depend on the criteria you give us. You know, if you want an astrophysicist who also does ballet in part-time and plays the cello, and that is your criteria, then we are going to struggle to find a donor for you. But actually, what I have found with most people is that you really appreciate the altruism of these donors. They are incredibly kind, and I can't say enough about them. They just genuinely want to help, and it's getting that whole person who, again, we feel that you would like, and you can say no to that donor. We will keep looking for a donor for you. But it can, so really going back to this question, which I'm rambling about, is that it can be very quick. It can take about 3 or 4 months. It can take a bit longer, but we usually find people a donor within about 6 months. It can be 6 to 7 or 8 months. It so depends on where you are in the process yourselves, which clinic you're at. There are a lot of aspects, but working with Apricity, it's fantastic, because we are able then to draw on donors from out the country and to make it work for you, and that speeds things up massively.
Great. And just as an add-on, and then I promise we'll move on, but we will come back. So there's a lot of emphasis on physical characteristics. If a recipient is more ready to be more flexible about these criteria, will it increase their chances of finding a donor more quickly?
It's not really about physical characteristics at all. I'm sorry if I gave that impression. It's about the overall person. If it was important to you to have a donor who had green eyes and red hair, then obviously that's what we would look for. But you set up what you would like us to look for in a donor, and it might, and by the time we've talked, you might just find, look, you know, we just trust you, which I hope you would do. Let us find you someone, and you can say no, but it's not really about physical characteristics at all. It really isn't. I think that comes down, and I'm sorry if you got that impression. It's more about the person.
Great. I think maybe the question was asked a while ago, so.
Okay.
Perfect. So I'm now going to bring up the really, really lovely Becky Kearns, who's a fertility blogger under the handle Defining Mom. She's got a fantastic website and is on social media, and went through egg donation in 2015. So we'll ask her a little bit about her experience. Here we go, and we will come back to the questions later as well. Hi, Becky, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. It's lovely to see you again. I'm going to jump right into it since we have so many questions. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and how you came to egg donation, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So just to tell you a little bit about myself now, I'm 34 and I'm a mum to 3 girls. So Mila is my eldest, she's 3, nearly 4, and I have 2-year-old twins, Esker and Lena, as well. So yeah, my journey began back in 2014 when we'd started trying for a baby. I was 27, 28 at the time, so didn't anticipate any issues. But it was about 7 months into trying that I had some tests run, and I was basically diagnosed with premature ovarian failure. So my AMH was really low, my FSH was really high, and our chances were pretty much around, I think they said around 5% with my eggs. So that was a huge shock, and something that took quite a bit of time to get our head around. And that's a lot of the reason why I started the blog, really, to try and help people, because I felt very much alone at the time. And I was told that egg donation would be our best chance, but wasn't ready to accept that at first. So we went through 5 cycles of IVF over the course of about 18 months, just under 18 months. The first cycle, I had 1 embryo and I became pregnant, but sadly miscarried at 7 weeks. And that almost gave me that hope that then it was going to happen, but sadly the next few cycles were unsuccessful. And it was over time that I then started to warm more to the idea of egg donation, and I started to think about what I really wanted. Ultimately, I wanted to be a mum, and I started to think about what really mattered to me, and that was I really wanted to carry a child. And I started to realize that actually genetics maybe weren't as important as, and I started to think about all the things I could do in terms of nurture, and it became more of an option. So, and this is part of the thing I talk about a lot, in terms of it's not an easy decision for everybody. Some will find it easier than others, and I do share a lot around the fears and the emotions that I felt at the time, because in essence, I look back now, I was grieving the loss of my own genetics. I'd always imagined having my own little mini-me, and just thought I'd be like the rest of my friends, and it had just happened. But yeah, I had to accept that wasn't going to be the case, and we weren't going to have the most traditional route to parenthood. My husband took a while to come around to the idea, but he kind of got there in the end. And since then, we've not really looked back. So yeah, we embarked on egg donation back in 2015, and we were really lucky that it worked first time. So I got pregnant with Mina on the first round, and then we went back a year later and had 2 transferred, and I had twins. So yeah, it's happy ending.
Fantastic.
And did you have any specific worries or concerns before starting?
Yeah, well, I still remember vividly the moment that it was mentioned to me, and I didn't even know that egg donation was a thing. I didn't even know that people donated eggs, let alone used them to create a child and a family. So it initially just felt so alien, and I thought, oh, it's really odd, it's really weird. How do I explain that to other people? So I was worried about what people would think, especially with that being my initial reaction. I worried about them not looking like me, which I kind of feel really guilty about now, but it was a genuine concern that people would be able to pick up straight away and say, oh, are you really the mum? And yeah, I think I worried whether I would feel like the real mum as well. So it, like I said, it was a gradual thing over time where I actually ended up meeting somebody through an online NetMums forum when I was trying to find answers to questions around success rates with low AMH, etc. And I came across a lady who had a little boy through egg donation, and she became like my mentor throughout the whole process. Never pushed me in any direction, but just allowed me to say how I was feeling. She validated all of my feelings, and actually through getting to know her, I was able to then see the reality of what life was like for her. And I met her and her little boy, and I could see the bond that they shared. I could see the love that was there. And there was no doubt that anybody walking down the street would look at them and not think that they're mother and son. And that just made me see it in a whole different way. I think I needed to see that. And that's part of the reason why I share the blog and I share on social media around, I want to just try and normalize it, because for me, it didn't feel normal. And but now I'm in that position. I couldn't imagine feeling any more love for the girls. I couldn't imagine any other child other than the children that I've got. So I think there are so many unknowns at the beginning. And I think that's the hard thing. You're kind of looking for some certainty around something. And that's the whole thing with infertility. There isn't any certainty, but I think I just needed to know that it was going to be okay. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't still have some wobbles as I was going through the egg donation process. But as soon as I saw the embryo on the screen, I just suddenly felt that was mine, and I fell in love with and I just, from that moment, and my daughter and I, my eldest daughter Mila and I are so close now, and people don't pick up on things like, oh, she looks like you, but they say that she sounds like me, and the way she does things, that's just like you. And even people that don't know, and it just gives me that little buzz inside every time someone says that, because I realize how much kind of nurturing can have that impact. And our bond is so strong, and I do talk to her about it. So I tell her about how she was very wanted and how special she is. I've got a special book that we read together. She knows that Mummy's eggs were broken and we needed some help from a special kind lady. She even actually the other day came out with, I was making some eggs for lunch. She said, Mummy, do you think the reason your eggs weren't working is because you ate them all? And it's so childlike. For her, that's her normal, and she just talks about it. And they all look so much like their dad, which actually I really like. That gives me that comfort that kind of they've got that connection with him. But there is no doubt at all, there's no way they feel more his children than mine. They are ours, and it's just the way we built our family, and that's the way I kind of want to tell the world, because I want them to grow up feeling like it is normal. I want them to feel they're able to speak about it and not have any shame, because I think that's one of the things I see and I hear about, and I felt myself a lot of shame around it, around not being able to use my own eggs. And I think it's something people need to talk about more, and it needs to be more known within society. So sorry, I've rambled on a lot there.
No, not at all. That's wonderful. So what would you say to someone who maybe was having some of the similar worries that you have? Is there any words that you would share with someone who may be considering egg donation?
My advice would always be to try and connect with others who have either been through it or are still on the same journey, because that will validate how you're feeling. I did have counselling myself, not specifically fertility related. It was a general counsellor, because I was just struggling with everything at the time. It was a really emotional time, and that helped me to be able to sit in a room and to be able to say some of the things out loud in a non-judgmental environment, rather than bottling it all up. Because I think, and I've done a lot of reading since, and I've done a lot of talking. I do some Insta lives with a therapist all about these fears and emotions. And I think sometimes the more you ignore them early on, the more you bottle them up, and you sometimes can then maybe project them out as a parent. And at the point where the girls ask me questions, which undoubtedly will come, and I need to be in a position where I can answer them without them feeling like they're going to upset me, or that it's something that I feel shame around. So there's a lot of work I do with other therapists, and I've actually got an event which you guys are sponsoring. So I've got a second date now where it's all about donor decisions and beyond, and it's getting people in the room who are in the same position to connect with each other, getting people who have been through sperm donation, solo mums, egg donation, all these different experiences, along with a therapist who's used to speaking with people in that position, and just allowing them to speak openly about how they're feeling, and to speak to others, and just have that conversation that will make them feel more comfortable, I think, with the idea. And it's not to say it's not for everybody. Some people may never get to that point, but I do want to try and paint the positive reality that life can be amazing. I mean, I've got chocolate fingerprints on my t-shirt from one of my little ones earlier. Yeah, lockdown is interesting with 3 little ones at the moment, but that's the reality. And what I also want to talk about is the reality of I hate the word consequence, but the fallout of using an egg donor. You do have to talk about it, and it's something that I found I've become more comfortable about as they're younger and they're not kind of responding. It's allowed me to kind of say it, and I've cried as I've read books to them, but it's just about being comfortable yourself to then be comfortable to talk to your children about it moving forwards.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Becky. I'll mention that I also have chocolate on my on my shirt, except I don't have any kids, so no excuse. A quick question. First of all, some wonderful feedback from the chat about you. Someone was asking if you had any resistance from the clinic for a dual embryo transfer.
No. So I think, just to be clear now, it was also 5 years ago now, we went to Prague for our treatment. So we had our treatment abroad. And to be honest, we had planned to go back and just have 1 embryo transferred, but they had frozen our 4 remaining embryos in 2 pairs. So it was a decision really that was taken out of our hands. And obviously I look back now and I'm glad that that was the case, because we've got our twins. But yeah, that was something that I was quite shocked about at the time, and we did have some discussions about, is it the right thing to have 2 put back? So yeah, I can't really comment on the decisions over here in the UK. That was kind of my experience at the time.
Can I come in there, actually, because it is recommended in the UK that this single embryo transfer, it is actually much safer ultimately, and when you're using donor eggs where the chances of conceiving is really very high, it is far safer for you as a recipient to have a single transfer than it is to go for a 2 embryo transfer. Yeah,
and I think I had those thoughts in mind at the time, and I think we were in a position where we didn't want to lose an embryo, so we went for it. I was terrified when I found out there were twins, because I was worried about the impact on me as the pregnancy. The pregnancy was much tougher, and I did deliver a month early. So yeah, if I compare that to the single embryo transfer, it was much easier, and I felt a lot more at ease having just the 1 in there rather than 2. But yeah, I think the clinics over here, I think, are a lot more cautious about transferring 2.
Becky, thank you so much. I think everyone's taken great pleasure in hearing your story. It's so lovely. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Actually, I did mean to say, I've got on my desk. I was just going to show you the girls, just if everybody wants to just have a look.
That's lovely. I'm going to now bring up Leanne. Alison, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, Leanne is one of our spectacularly kind altruistic donors who's been through us in the past. She's done incredibly well, and I see, like me, she's got long hair. Last time I saw her, she had short hair, so this is all very different, probably like us all. But Leanne, you've just been absolutely amazing, and I think probably, maybe it's Julia asking you to just sort of talk about your experiences a wee bit, because I think you can explain who you are far better than I can.
Do you want to know just a bit about myself so far, or?
Yeah, that would be great. And then if you could move into the journey and what brought you to egg donation.
So I'm 38 now, so too old to donate, but I've got 2 children, a daughter of 16 and an 11-year-old boy, and they're both fully aware of the fact I've donated and shared my full journey with it. But I first came into donation having had my daughter. Actually, I didn't have a particularly nice birth, and sort of sat around deep in thought, taking it for granted a bit, that actually it was quite a scary moment that I could have lost her. And it brought to light a lot of, that I perhaps took it for granted that I could even have a child in the first place. It didn't even register to me until that time that people do struggle to have children. And a random drive to work one day, I heard a discussion about it on the radio, and it sort of distracted my thoughts. And I thought, actually, that's the second time that sort of cropped up in my head and made me think about it a bit more. So, I looked into it, got information about it, and went from there, really. So yeah, that's sort of how I started the journey of donation.
And how long were you thinking about it? Did you come Altrui through research, or how did you choose who to go to?
I knew Altrui was really personal, which is what I liked. I knew it was one-to-one donation. That was something else that I felt was quite important to me. So I contacted them, and they were brilliant. They were so thorough, so clear about everything. I must have asked them so many questions that I probably felt was ridiculous at the time, but to them, it wasn't out of the ordinary. It was made clear to me the answers I needed, and that was the reason I chose Altrui.
Great. And how were you looked after? What was the process like?
Brilliant from start to finish. Honestly, they were really personal. Messages of encouragement. Always on the end of the phone if I needed them, clear and concise, and I knew everybody's names even though I hadn't met them. I felt like we were, a bit of like a family unit, really. It was really personal. I had no worries about contacting them. I didn't fear asking the questions. We'd built up such a rapport with numerous telephone calls and things like that as we'd started the journey, that when it came to treatment, it just made the whole thing even more exciting, and I felt like they were with me on that journey as well. Didn't feel on my own at all. It felt really personal, and as I say, words of encouragement, even little things. Day before egg collection was, we're thinking of you, good luck, and we hope you're okay. And again, as soon as transfer egg collection had been done, they contacted me to make sure I was okay and how I was feeling, and it was continuous right through from start to finish, and I still have a really good rapport with them all now.
Obviously. Oh, that's great. I see that a question has come in, and you touched on it a little bit. So you say that your kids know that you've donated. Could you go into that a little bit? So maybe how you told them, how they feel about it.
So my youngest one, to be honest, is a typical boy. He's not really bothered. He's just accepting that I'm helping a lady have children, and that's how he sees it. He's a bit blasé. The eldest one has been so excited, thinks it's brilliant what I've done, to the point where even through treatment, she helped inject. She knew everything. She took part in it all. She asked me questions, and every time I had scans and things like that, she asked me how it went and how many eggs were in there and how they were doing, and she thinks it's brilliant.
That's so sweet. And what do you think about when you think of the donor conceived children? What are your thoughts towards both the recipient and the child?
I'm not going to say there's no curiosity there. Of course there is. That's the whole point of doing it. It's to make sure you've made someone happy, which it's the recipient. I think I probably have more thoughts about than the child, actually, because the recipient's almost there indirectly through the whole journey, even though you've never met them or never spoken to them or don't know anything about them. They're there from day one because you know somebody's there that needs the help. As for the child, it's, yes, there's the curiosity there of what they look like and whether they're okay, but I wouldn't say there's an attachment curiosity there. It's more, I'd love to be able to speak to the recipient and just see how they are and how it's made them as a unit.
Can I just jump in as a recipient? Leanne, I can't even put into words the change you would have made to somebody's life. It makes me really emotional talking about it now. And we weren't as lucky to know as much about donors as you do over here and through Altrui and etc. And I always wish that I would know a bit more about her, but I always just imagine that she must be an incredibly kind person to go through all of those injections and the process to put themselves through that for somebody else to be able to have a child. And yeah, I just get really emotional, and all I feel towards the donor is just complete gratitude for someone that has totally changed my life. So
thank you.
I'm getting emotional now.
They really, really are. I'm lucky enough to speak to quite a few of the Altrui donors, and it's such a pleasure. They are, you couldn't find nicer people. Maybe I'll go through a few more of the questions, and we'll aim to wrap up just before 7. So I think this one would be for Alison. If a donor child wants to find out about his or her biological mother, are they able to, or is it completely anonymous?
You mean a genetic mother? Biological mother is you. It is anonymous at the point of donation. So a donor conceived person, any child you have, has a legal right to know about non-identifying information when they're 16, and they have the legal right to know identifying information about 18. As a recipient, you can't find anything out. You will get all the information that we can give you, which is pretty much, you couldn't identify the donor, but you do get a lot of information. And we feel that's really important. So you can bring a child up and say, look, we can't tell you everything, but we can tell you all of this. We can tell you what she's like and why we sort of chose her for you. And then that lays the groundwork for the future. So yeah, so a child can find out at 18.
Great. There are a few people asking whether Altrui do known donation.
We don't do known donation as such. The reason for that is that I feel that it's really strong. I feel quite strongly that, having worked in fertility for so long, I need to look after and protect you as a recipient. I need to look after and protect the donor as a donor. It is such an emotional journey, this, as a recipient, that it's very easy for a donor to feel quite overwhelmed with that sense of your grief and your desire to have a child, which she can provide. So I need to look after the donor for that reason. And I also need to look after you, because you may not want contact with that person once you become pregnant or once you've got a baby. So from all my experience, which is getting a bit long in the tooth now, I really feel that known donation, it's great if you have a sister or someone who's a really close friend. But as I said at the beginning of this webinar, it's times where things go wrong and you might fall out that, that's what I'm trying to protect you from, having set Altrui up in the way that I have. But it doesn't stop you finding somebody, but don't just find anybody. You've got to feel some affinity with that person. I feel quite strongly, because if it goes wrong, it can go so badly wrong, and you can be in a far worse position than you might be otherwise.
Do you see a lot of people dealing with secondary infertility?
Yeah, I think secondary infertility is just is really terrible. Both primary and secondary are just terrible in their own different ways. Secondary infertility, I think, is just so soul-destroying when you want a second child for that first one, a sibling, and it's very often people have a child that's genetically theirs, reaches the age of 3 or 4, and sort of usual thing, mummy, where's my baby sister, where's my baby brother, when are you going to give me one? And it can just add to that sense of, I think you were saying, Becky, that sense of failure or that sense of shame. Why can't I do this? You know, why can't I get this right for them? So yeah, it is a really common thing. So please don't feel you're on your own. There are a lot of people who suffer from secondary infertility. We don't know, you know, it's primary infertility is more talked about, but secondary infertility, I think, is that really hidden deep grief that just doesn't sort of go.
Yeah, I think just touching on secondary infertility, I don't know whether whoever asked the question is on Instagram, but there's a real support community on Instagram, which is where I do a lot of my work. And one of the things I do is try and connect people with others. So I know a number of people on there that are sharing their stories who have a genetic child who have then gone on to have a child through a donor. And I think it's just what I was saying about connecting with others, it's connecting with those that have had that similar experience, because they will have had the same worries, the same thoughts that have gone through their head. So if anyone wants to contact me and get some contacts through that network, then yeah, please do.
I'll share your information after in the webinar link. I have a question for Leanne. So how would Leanne feel or react if a child reached out to her at 18?
To be honest, I'd quite like it. Again, for curiosity, and to actually have that sense of achievement as face to face, or in person, or as a real thing, really. You hear that it's worked, you hear that they've had the baby, but again, it's that curiosity of seeing it for yourself, isn't it? And I think, I'd be quite happy to open the door and say hi, really, and just share the experience, I guess. But we'll see if that happens.
Alison, there were a few questions on costs and whether the structure can be explained.
Okay, so there's 3 sets of costs, really. There's the fee that we charge to find somebody a donor and all the work and the advertising we put in for that. There is the donor compensation, which comes further down the line, and then there's the clinical costs. The clinical costs vary from clinic to clinic. The apricity costs are transparent, they're on their website, as are ours. And but overall, in a ballpark with everything included, it's usually about £13,000 wherever you go.
Great. I can't believe it's already close to 7. I know there are still questions that we haven't answered. What I would propose that we do is in our webinar send out, which we'll send out an email after this, we include some of the answers. For some of the more specific ones, I would suggest for you to get in contact directly with Altrui, since they are quite a case-by-case basis. I'd like to extend a very, very warm thank you to Becky and Leanne, who made the time today to share their experiences, and I think I'm not alone saying how wonderful it was to hear that. So thank you both very much. Alison, yes. Do you have some final words?
My words, as I said earlier about talking to others, and in terms of that advice, is that, well, it can be wonderful, it can be amazing, it can be everything you've always wanted. So my advice is just kind of don't ignore your emotions, think about things, do your research. And from what I've heard about Altrui, and I first listened to a podcast, which is actually where I came across Apricity and Altrui. I feel that you'd be in great hands, and yeah, I kind of look back now and I think, I wish I'd have known that work had gone into finding our donor at the time. So
thank you, thanks.
And
And so,
sorry, go ahead, Alison.
Leanne, do you want to say anything, or should I just wrap up?
I would just say to anybody that wants to or thinks of donating to don't listen to the, the telltale, untrue, gossipy comments that people say. Go to the real people and ask the direct questions, because a lot of the myth that you hear is so untrue, and the stigma behind it. It's such a great achievement to do, and to go for it.
Thanks. And probably, shall I wrap up, Julia, just to say thanks as well? I mean, you've just been unbelievable, both of you, and Julia too, for hosting this. I think really the main message I want to sort of send back at this time is to say, look, it is a difficult decision to make, but you know what? There's so many people rooting for you. There's so many people out there who can help you. And it's a good time to do this. As I said, it's a time when, with lockdowns, a lot of people who are out there looking to help in all sorts of different ways. And, people like Leanne are just fantastic. And, we're here to help you in that process. And the Fertility are here to help you once we've got the donor for you. And of course, they're there to help you in a general fertility journey if that's what you want as well. So I guess I just want to say thanks very much for coming, and it's been a real pleasure just being part of this.
I'll just remind everyone that both Altrui, who handle the donor matching, and Fertility, who handle more the fertility and fertility care side of things, are open regularly, almost regularly, not on Sundays for Fertility, but we are here. We're here to answer questions. We're on the other side of the phone, so don't hesitate to just to call us, and we'll be there. Thank you so much once again to everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye.